Hey, what is going on, guys? In this video today, we're going to be going over how to tunnel for console Fortnite players. As I've stated a few different times in previous videos, I personally believe that tunneling is one of the most important skills to learn if you want to be a good Fortnite player. However, if you're a controller and especially a console player, learning how to tunnel may seem a bit intimidating. Not only because it's definitely more difficult to do on controller than it is on mouse and keyboard, but also because there are at least 6 to 7 different types of tunnels that players use. So the purpose of this video is to show you guys the methods of tunneling that I believe are viable on console, discussing the order in which you want to place the pieces for each method, and also discussing the general positives and negatives of each method. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Alright, so with these tunneling methods, we're going to go in order from most simple / easy to complete to most complicated / hardest. So let's start with by far the simplest tunnel to learn, the floor ramp tunnel. No matter how bad of a builder you are in Fortnite, I truly believe that you can learn the floor ramp tunnel in roughly 2 to 5 minutes if you hop into creative mode and practice it. It's as simple as placing a floor in front of you, looking almost straight down at the ground while continuing to run forward, and then placing a ramp once you get past about the halfway point of the floor. If done correctly, this will place the ramp behind you, so your back will be totally blocked off at all times. So the positives and negatives of this method are fairly obvious. The two biggest positives are the fact that, as I already discussed, this is incredibly easy to learn and then execute in-game without messing up, and also since it only uses 2 building pieces per tile, it's also the cheapest tunnel in terms of materials used. But as good as those positives may sound, at least in my opinion, the negatives greatly outweigh them. First off, this tunneling method only protects your back. You're pretty much 100% exposed from your front as well as your right and left sides. Also, since the placement of the ramp only works if you're looking towards the ground, you're going to be pretty much totally oblivious to anything going on in front of you. So honestly, calling this method a tunnel is a bit of a stretch, and in my opinion, it's only viable if you know you're only exposed from your back or if you're ridiculously low on materials. The next tunneling method on our list goes by a few different names. I've heard it called the sideways ramp tunnel, the triangle tunnel, and the peanut butter tunnel. That may make it sound complicated, but it's actually a fairly simple one to execute. You start by placing a floor, then you place a wall on either your right or left side, and after doing that, you want to look towards the wall that you placed, and while doing so, place a ramp. If done correctly, the wall will protect you from one of your sides, while the sideways ramp protects you from the other one, and also from up top. And even though you are still exposed from your front and your back, you're more like half exposed because of the way the sideways ramp is placed. Don't get me wrong, if the enemy is right behind or in front of you, it's going to be relatively easy hits, but the ramp will protect you from some enemies at certain angles. The positives with this method are that it's still relatively easy to learn and use, you're protected well from your sides, and even though it isn't as cheap material-wise as the last method, 30 mats per tile isn't bad. The negatives are you're pretty exposed from your front and back, plus you have to look at a bit of an odd angle to place the sideways ramp. Your vision won't be as bad as it was with the last method, but you may miss certain things going on in front of you. Overall, I actually really recommend this tunneling method for console players, especially if you aren't super confident in your mechanics. It may look a bit wonky, but it's easy to learn, pretty light on mats, and you're protected surprisingly well. Moving on to what I like to call the standard tunnel, the mechanics of this one are pretty straightforward as a whole. You place a floor at your feet and above you, then you build a wall on the left side and right side. Now, even though that's pretty simple, the placement timing on this one is where it gets a bit tricky. The first step of turbo building the 2 floors is pretty easy, but it's the wall placement that messes a lot of people up. If you try holding down RT/R2 while trying to build the side walls, you're going to actually end up placing a wall in front of you, which is going to really mess things up. So if you want to prevent that from happening, you need to individually tap build the wall on your left and the wall on your right. It's also worth noting that players who use a lower building sensitivity are going to find this tunneling method especially difficult, and that's because it requires you to flick your crosshair all the way from the right to left side or vice versa. The positives of this method are that it protects you from your left, right, and top, plus unlike the last two methods, you're looking forward the entire time, so you'll have a much better idea of what's going on around you. The negatives are that it requires 40 mats per tile, which is kinda high, and again, the placement of the two side walls can be really tricky. The next tunneling method is commonly referred to as the diagonal tunnel, and this is probably the method that I use most frequently. It starts the same way as the standard tunnel by placing a floor at your feet and on top of you, but then instead of placing a wall to your left and right, you instead place a wall in front of you and then another one either to your left or right. And you want to alternate direction each time you build a new tile. So in terms of rhythm, the placement would go something like floor, floor, wall in front, wall to the left, then you'd sprint to the open right side and go floor, floor, wall in front, wall to the right. I think this takes a bit more practice than the standard tunnel, but once you get it down, it's a lot smoother and easier to execute at high speeds because this time you can turbo build the two walls since you're placing them right next to each other. It's not like the standard tunnel where you need to place them individually since they're on opposite sides. The other positive of this method is that due to the diagonal building, you're constantly protecting yourself from different angles, which makes it really hard for an enemy to line up a shot on you no matter what angle they're at. In my experience, the biggest negative of this method is that if you don't have good situational map and positioning awareness, you can get kinda lost in your rotation since you aren't going in a straight line. With all the other methods, that isn't really a problem, you can just go directly from point A to point B. Also, just gotta say the same thing I did with the last tunnel, at 40 mats per tile, this tunnel can drain you pretty quickly. The next tunneling method is what and I think most other players call a full tunnel. When it comes to understanding this tunnel, it actually isn't all that difficult, but the hard part is actually doing it correctly. It's basically just a standard tunnel that we covered earlier, but you also place a wall in front of you and edit through it. So the placement mechanics are basically turbo build a floor at your feet, then in either a left to right or right to left motion, turbo build the three walls as well as the floor on top of you. The direction you choose honestly doesn't matter because if done correctly, it'll give you the same result. And obviously, since you have a wall in front of you, you're gonna need to either do a bottom corner 3 tile or 4 tile edit while sprinting so you don't stop. Now, at least in my opinion, I really don't think this is a worthwhile tunnel to learn if you're a controller and especially a console player. The positives of this method are obviously that you're protected at pretty much every angle, even your back, because the triangle you leave behind you with the edit gives you some cover, but this tunnel is obviously going to be incredibly hard to do consistently. You need to place 5 different structures and confirm an edit all while sprinting in about half a second, and if you mess up at all, you get stopped by the front wall and it throws off all your timing. And even if you are able to do it correctly, 50 mats per tile is a really high amount, so that's another major negative. In my opinion, out of all the tunneling methods I showed in this video, the ones you should most focus on are the diagonal tunnel, the sideways ramp / triangle tunnel, and maybe the standard tunnel. The triangle tunnel is a really good one for beginners, and like I said earlier, it provides a surprising amount of cover for how easy it is. But even if you master that one, I would still recommend going a step further and trying to learn one of the more advanced tunnels. If you want my input, I'd tell you the diagonal tunnel is better than the standard one, but I'm sure there are plenty of people out there that would disagree with that. The good thing about tunneling is it's a skill that doesn't take a ton of mechanical talent, more so just a mastery of placement timing, which you can easily practice on your own in creative mode whenever you have the time. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you watched the entire thing, be sure to let me know with a comment down in the comment section below. Let me know which tunneling method you either use the most while playing or plan on using the most after watching this video. Be sure to leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe, turn on post notifications, do whatever the heck you want, and I will catch you guys next time.